I was on the ladder, gripping a string of Christmas lights, when I heard it clearly. She's just the stepkid. That was my sister, not after what the lawyer found. My stepmom's voice cut like ice. They didn't know the cracked window betrayed them, or that my phone was recording every word. They assumed I'd keep paying. They were wrong. Tonight, I am quietly changing the lights, and I am changing the entire game. My name is Lexi Rivera. I am 33 years old, and I am a structural engineer. I own Iron Light Renovations, a mid-sized firm that specializes in keeping buildings in the Great Lakes region from falling into the water or collapsing under snow. My work is about load paths, tensile strength, and the unseen forces that hold things together or tear them apart. This is Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The cold that comes off Lake Michigan in December is not a gentle cold. It is a physical weight. It is a presence that finds every crack in the mortar, every gap in the window ceiling. Today, it was rattling the aluminum rungs of the ladder I was standing on, making the metal sing a low, whining note against the roofline of my father's house. This house sits in one of the older lakeside suburbs, a place of heavy oaks and established facades. Inside, my family was gathered. My father, Victor, a man who understands the dense beauty of a first-edition Hemingway, but not the cold reality of a balance sheet for his small bookstore cafe. My stepmother, Elise, a woman of curated elegance and absolute financial control, who always smelled faintly of expensive lotion and unspoken disapproval, and my stepsister, Bianca, Elise's daughter, a person defined by her status-conscious marriage and her innate talent for making others feel small. I was outside, 8 feet up, trying to secure the last string of oversized Christmas bulbs to the gutter. The wind was brutal, whipping my braid against my cheek like a frozen rope. My work gloves, thick leather lined with fleece, were already dusted in green and gold glitter that refused to brush off. We really should have hired professionals for this. Lexi. Elise had called through the storm door an hour earlier. Her voice muffled but her disapproval clear. It looks so strenuous. It's fine. Elise, I'm almost done. I had called back, not looking down. She had nodded, a tight little smile, and retreated to the warmth. She had said the same thing last year. She let me do it. Of course, because professionals cost money. I was free. I was the family structural engineer, the family general contractor, the family checkbook for anything too unglamorous for her to budget for. I was focusing on a stubborn plastic clip, my fingers aching inside the gloves, when their voices drifted out from the study window just above my head. The window was old, single pane, and Victor always left it cracked an inch, claiming he liked the fresh air, even when it was 10 degrees. That cracked inch was a perfect acoustic vent. First, Bianca's voice, sharp and dismissive. It's ridiculous. Why are we even pretending she's just the stepkid? I froze. My entire body went rigid. The wind roared in my ears, but it was suddenly distant. All I could hear was the space inside that room. I held my breath. The clip in my hand felt impossibly heavy. Then, Elise, her voice was lower, smoother, like chilled mercury. Not after what the lawyer found. Bianca, that changes everything. A pause. The wind died for a second, creating a vacuum of perfect, terrible silence. They did not know I was there. They did not know their words were traveling on the same bitter cold that was numbing my face. They did not know that the phone in my jacket pocket, the one I used to take site photos of rebar layouts and foundation cracks, was now recording audio. I didn't move. I didn't climb down. I didn't shout. My reaction was not emotional. It was structural. I felt a sudden, clear sensation of a support beam giving way, a catastrophic failure in a load-bearing wall. The facade of family had just sheared off, revealing the rotten framework underneath. They thought I would keep paying. They thought I would keep fixing their sagging porches and leaking roofs, blissfully unaware. They were wrong. I stayed on that ladder for another minute, focusing on my breath, watching it plume white in the air. Below me, the bed of my truck, my Iron Light Renovations truck, was slowly being covered in a pristine, untouched layer of snow. It looked like a clean white sheet, erasing the tools, the bags of concrete mix, the sawdust. It was a perfect metaphor for the $61,800 I had poured into their lives over the last 2 years. Expenses that were never acknowledged, never recorded. $61,800, that was the number my forensic accountant, Marjorie, had confirmed last week. It started 2 years ago, when the roof on Victor's bookstore, the quill compass, began to leak. Elise had lamented the disastrous estimates. I had stepped in, calling my own roofing crew, getting it done at cost. I paid the invoice. Then it was the foundation of the cafe addition, which was settling dangerously. I had spent a month of weekends designing a new micropile system myself, supervising the pour. I paid for the materials. Then, the entire HVAC system, which was ancient and inefficient. "We'll lose the holiday rush if the heat fails," Elise had cried. I had fronted the entire cost for a new high-efficiency system. Each time, Elise had promised it was a temporary family loan, that things would be sorted. The sorting never came. I gripped the cold aluminum rail of the ladder. The glitter on my gloves caught the weak afternoon light. I would not confront them. Confrontation is messy. It is uncontrolled demolition. I prefer a methodical, planned dismantling. I would continue to hang these lights, and then I would go inside, and I would change the entire game. My mind was already working, sketching out a new blueprint, an emergency plan, the immediate priorities. I remembered what my father had said just last week, his face beaming with innocent pride as he stirred his coffee. "Elise is a marvel. Lexi, she's meeting with Bianca's husband, Ethan, to optimize our estate, just tidying up the books, making it all neat." I had smiled, a tight, polite smile that I had perfected over 20 years. "That's great, Dad. Optimize, tidy." Such clean words for what felt like erasure. She's just the stepkid. Not after what the lawyer found. They had found a tool to cut me out, a legal loophole. I was a line item to be deleted. I finished clipping the last bulb. I tested the connection. The lights flared on, a warm, festive white against the gray sky. They looked perfect. I climbed down the ladder, my movements deliberate and steady. I packed the ladder onto the truck's roof rack, my frozen fingers fumbling with the ratchet straps. The snow in the truck bed was already an inch deep. I went inside. The warmth of the house was shocking. A physical slap. Elise and Bianca were in the kitchen, laughing over a seed catalog. "Oh, Lexi, you must be frozen solid," Elise said, not looking up. "There's cocoa on the stove." Bianca was just telling me about the most divine little inn they found in Napa. "Thanks," I said. My voice sounded normal. Even, "I need to use the restroom." I walked past them, down the hall. The study door was closed now. The air vent, a vintage brass grill near the floor, was just where I remembered. I had inspected it last year when Elise complained of a draft. From my pocket, I took the small, high-definition camera. It was the size of a sugar cube, a piece of equipment I used to inspect inside walls and ductwork. It had a magnetic base and a 24-hour battery life. I knelt, pretending to tie my boot. My movements were hidden by the grandfather clock that stood in the hall. It took 3 seconds. I angled the camera through the slats of the grill, aiming it toward the desk where Victor and Elise always handled their papers. It adhered to the inside of the metal duct with a faint, satisfying click. No trace. No one ever cleaned inside the vents. I stood up, walked into the bathroom, and washed my hands. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. My face was raw from the wind, my eyes clear and cold. I was not a stepkid. I was a structural engineer. And I understood, better than anyone, that before you can rebuild, you must first identify every point of failure. You must document the decay. You must have a blueprint of the lies. As I walked back toward the kitchen, a gust of wind hit the house, rattling the storm windows. Out on the porch, the set of old metal wind chimes Elise hated, a gift from my biological mother, began to clash violently, a high, sharp, metallic warning in the dying light. The overture had begun, in my profession. You learn that failure is rarely a single, dramatic event. It is a process. It is a series of small, unaddressed stresses, a hairline crack in a foundation, the slow corrosion of a steel tie rod, the persistent, subtle application of weight until the load exceeds the design capacity. My family was a structure, and I had finally realized, its primary load-bearing element. The architecture of our dependency was designed by Elise and enabled by my father, Victor. Victor is a man of profound intellect in one specific area, the printed word. He can date a binding by its stitching, identify a typeface by its serif. He is a perfectionist regarding the atmosphere of his bookstore, but when it comes to finance, he is willfully, almost profoundly, ignorant. He finds adding machines distasteful and refers to spreadsheets as grids into this vacuum. Elise had stepped 20 years ago. She did not just manage the household accounts. She became the accounts. She held the bank cards. She set the passwords. She handled the taxes. Victor, relieved, retreated into his cozy world of paperback aisles and artisanal coffee, signing whatever she put in front of him. He trusted her. He mistook her control for competence. Then there was Bianca, and her husband, Ethan Marlowe. Ethan was a lawyer, but not the kind that argues in courtrooms. He worked for a mid-sized firm in a polished suburban office park, specializing in wealth preservation for people who had more anxiety than actual wealth. Bianca, by extension, had adopted this veneer of class. They spoke often about optics and legacy and positioning. They judged people by their zip codes and their choice of European car. My work, my company, was a source of quiet embarrassment to them. Ironlight Renovations was not classy. We did not do interior design or flip houses for television shows. We were the emergency room for buildings. My specialty was shoreline reinforcement. When Lake Michigan's aggressive wave cycles and ice shoves threatened to pull a multi-million-dollar home off its bluff, I was the one they called. I drove a truck. I wore steel-toed boots and a hard hat. My days were spent analyzing soil mechanics and calculating shear stress. My success was built on concrete, rebar, and physics things Bianca and Elise found distasteful. They called Ironlight my little workshop. It was a condescending pat on the head, a way to diminish it. They never asked about my contracts, only that I try not to track mud in when I arrived. This dynamic defined the flow of capital. My little workshop, which employed 12 people and held significant municipal contracts, became the unofficial treasury for their lifestyle. The money flowed in one direction. I paid for the new roof on the bookstore. I paid for the new kitchen in Victor's house, a project Elise insisted upon, complete with marble counters that the original floor joists could not support, requiring me to spend a weekend sistering new beams in the crawl space. I paid for Victor's property taxes when Elise miscalculated the quarterly payment. In return, I received criticism. When I bought a new wide-format plotter for my blueprints, Bianca remarked that it was such a shame. I wasn't more interested in feminine things. When I invoiced the bookstore politely, professionally for the HVAC system, Elise had cried. "Lexi, how can you be so cold?" she had whispered, her hand fluttering to her throat. "This is family. We are just in a tight spot. I will, of course, settle up as soon as the market improves." The market always improved. The settlement never came. Bianca's attacks were sharper, designed to undercut my confidence. Ethan says successful men are often intimidated by women in reflective vests. Lexi, she'd mentioned casually at Thanksgiving, they prefer a woman who compliments them, not competes. The implication was clear. My work made me unlovable. I should be grateful for any inclusion in their normal family, and the price of that inclusion was my silence and my checkbook. But they mistook my habits for my personality. I am not a quiet person. I am a precise one. I am an engineer. I document everything. It is the core principle of my work. You do not eyeball a support beam. You measure it. You do not guess at material strength. You test it. For the past 5 years, every time I paid one of their bills, I saved the invoice, I scanned the receipt. Every email from Elise promising repayment was moved to a locked, encrypted folder on my server. Every text message from Victor asking for a quick float was screenshotted. I had a meticulous, time-stamped record of the $61,800 and countless smaller expenses. I did this not because I planned a war, but because I believe in blueprints. You must know the as-built condition of a structure before you can diagnose its flaws. I was bolting every joint, logging every stress test. The stress escalated 3 months ago. Elise, flush with some new idea from Ethan, proposed a financial optimization. She wanted to merge the deed to the house, which was in Victor's name, and the deed to the bookstore property, which was also in his name. It is just to simplify the estate, Lexi, she had explained, her voice smooth and reasonable. Ethan says we can leverage the combined properties to reduce our overall tax burden. It is just housekeeping. My internal alarms did not just ring. They shrieked. You do not merge distinct properties to reduce taxes. You do it to create a single, larger asset, an asset that can be borrowed against, an asset that can be sold. Ethan had provided what he called a preliminary sketch of the optimization. It was 4 pages of dense, legal jargon. It was intentionally opaque. It was concrete mixed with far too much water, all volume, no strength, designed to confuse Victor and look impressive. Victor, naturally, had been completely won over. It is brilliant. Lexi, Ethan is helping us secure our future. But I was suspicious. I had told them I was too busy with a shoreline project to review the documents. I needed proof. The camera in the vent was the first piece. Hearing, "She's just the stepkid," was not the wound. The wound was old. That sentence was the engineering report that confirmed the diagnosis. It explained the entire system. I was not family. I was infrastructure. I was the hidden steel I-beam that held up the beautiful marble floor, the thing no one saw or appreciated, but without which the entire structure would collapse. They had piled weight on me for 20 years, assuming I would, and could, hold it, now. They had decided the infrastructure was no longer needed. They were planning to remove the beam. I sat in my office that night, the audio file playing on a secure laptop. I listened to it 3 times. The cold, analytical part of my brain took over. This was not a family drama. It was a project, a demolition project. I sketched out a critical path analysis, the same kind I use for a complex renovation. Phase 1 evidence collection. The camera was in. The audio was secured. Now, I needed the money trail. I emailed Marjorie Hale, my forensic accountant. The subject line was, "New Scope North Pier." I had a hunch I needed her to look beyond my personal loans. I needed her to look for where the optimization money was intended to go. Phase 2, audit and analysis. Compare their optimization sketch with the financial reality. Find the lies. Phase 3, disclosure. I needed a venue for Phase 3, a place where the demolition would have the most impact, where the facade they valued so highly would come down in front of the very people they sought to impress. I checked my calendar. In 3 weeks, they were hosting Bianca's 30th birthday party. It was going to be a large, catered affair at the house, their entire social circle. Ethan's partners, Elise's friends. It was perfect. A load-bearing wall should not be removed quietly in the night. It should be done in broad daylight, with all the necessary witnesses present, to ensure the entire rotten structure comes down with it. The camera in the vent was a risk, but it paid out within the first 48 hours. I retrieved the micro SD card at 3 a.m, swapping it for a fresh one while the house was heavy with sleep. I drove not to my apartment, but to my office. Iron Light Renovations was dark, smelling of sawdust and cold steel, a fortress of my own making. I locked myself in my private office, the one with sound-dampened walls, and plugged the card into a dedicated, offline laptop. The footage was clear, the audio, sharp. Elise and Bianca, sitting in the study, glasses of white wine in hand. Victor was at the bookstore, handling the evening holiday rush. Ethan says the deed transfer with Life Estate is the cleanest way, Elise said, swirling her glass. The house titles transfer to you. Bianca, effective immediately. I, of course, retain the right to live here until my death. And Victor, Bianca asked. He lives here too, naturally, as my husband, Elise said dismissively. The point is, the asset is secured in your name. His name comes off the deed entirely. My blood did not run cold. It felt like it was being replaced by a chemical solvent. They were legally stripping my father of his own home while he was still living in it. And it's all possible because of what Ethan found, Bianca prompted. Elise smiled, a tight, satisfied crescent. Exactly. She's just the stepkid. Ethan did a full search. Victor never legally adopted Lexi. Never. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She has no legal standing as his child. She is, in the eyes of the law, a stranger. All this family nonsense is just sentiment. It means she has no automatic claim, no right to contest his estate. She is removable. Removable. I was a non-structural element, a decorative partition that could be demolished to create an open-plan theft. I've already had Victor update his will, Elise continued, her voice brimming with pride. Everything goes to you, the house, the accounts, everything. He was so busy with that new poetry collection, he barely read it. He just signed. He trusts his wife. My hands were perfectly steady on the laptop. I watched the video file, my expression as neutral as if I were reviewing a stress test report. Bianca's eyes lit up. Everything. What about the bookstore? That's the beauty of it, Elise said. Once the assets are consolidated under my control, and with you as the sole heir, we sell the Quill Compass. It's sitting on prime commercial real estate. Ethan says, we liquidate it, transfer the capital to a managed account he's setting up for us, and finally get Victor to retire. He's no good with money. We'll give him an allowance. Of course. Sell the bookstore. The one thing that was entirely his. The one thing that gave his life meaning. They were going to gut his life for its real estate value. I closed the laptop. I ejected the card. I copied the file to 2 separate, encrypted external hard drives, one of which I kept in my office safe. The other I would place in a safety deposit box the next day. I then uploaded the file to a secure, private cloud server, using a multi-factor authentication system that only I could access. I was methodical. I was building a case. The camera was good, but the audio in the study was passive. It only caught what was said near the vent. I needed audio from the epicenter, the desk. The next evening, I came over for dinner, claiming I needed to check the radiators for the winter. I brought a gift for Elise. It was a heavy silver-plated picture frame. I thought this would look lovely on the desk, I said, all smiles. How thoughtful. Lexi, she said, her eyes barely glancing at it. Put it over there. The frame already contained a stock photo of a generic, smiling family. Tucked behind the velvet backing, I had installed a slim, voice-activated acoustic microphone with a remote transmitter. It was expensive, military grade, the kind of thing used in corporate espionage, or, in my case, structural analysis of a different kind. As I placed it on the corner of her desk, I angled it toward her high-backed leather chair. It was now live. My next call was to Marjorie Hale. Marjorie was a forensic accountant in her late 60s, a woman who found more beauty in a clean ledger than in a sunset. She was the best. Marjorie, I said, my voice crisp. Lexi Rivera, I'm expanding the scope of our review. Miss Rivera, I've already itemized the $61,800 you've spent. It's clean, if unwise, she replied, her voice like dry paper. That was phase 1, I said. Phase 2 is more complex. I need you to look for a ghost, a corporate entity. I suspect my stepmother and her son-in-law, Ethan Marlowe, are creating a shell. I gave her the details. I'm looking for small, irregular transfers from my father's bookstore account. Anything that he wouldn't notice. What kind of small? Under $9,000, I said. Marjorie was silent for a beat. Structuring. You are alleging they are structuring payments to avoid federal reporting thresholds. I am alleging nothing, I said. I am an engineer. I'm looking for a pattern of subsidence. You just tell me what the ground-penetrating radar shows. Marjorie simply said, "I'll send you an invoice," and hung up. It took her 1 week. The call came while I was on site, supervising a concrete pour for a retaining wall. I stepped away, the roar of the cement truck a dull background thrum. "North Pier Limited," Marjorie said, without preamble. "It's a domestic LLC, registered in Delaware 6 months ago. The registered agent is a service, but the incorporation documents were filed from an IP address that I traced back to the law firm of Marlowe, Hayes, and Becker, Ethan Marlowe's firm. And the money. 7 transfers in the last 6 months, from the Quill Compass operating account, all coded as consulting fees or property management, all for different amounts, but all under the $9,000 mark. The total is $58,500. The money sits in the North Pier Limited account, which has had no other activity. They were not just planning to steal. They had already begun. They were bleeding my father dry, using his own small profits to fund the legal architecture of his eventual ruin. I thanked Marjorie and hung up. I now had the conspiracy, the audio, the motive, and the money trail. But one thing still bothered me, the will. Victor signing away his life's work. It seemed too easy, even for him. That night, I reviewed the camera footage from the study again. The new mic I planted in the frame was also yielding results, picking up Elise's phone conversations, but it was the camera that delivered the twist. I watched a clip from 2 days prior. Elise was at the desk, alone. She was handling a stack of documents. One was the new will. I zoomed in, and then I saw it. She was not just reviewing the will. She was holding another document next to it, a simple draft of a letter to a vendor. She held them up to the light, comparing them. And then I understood. The signature on the will was identical. Pixel for pixel identical. It was not a signature. It was a high-resolution scan, a digital stamp. Elise had not had Victor sign the new will. She had told Bianca he signed it. She had used a scanned image of his signature, one she likely kept for draft documents or minor business correspondence, and affixed it to the new will. Victor had not signed it. He had not betrayed his own legacy. He was just a victim, naive and trusting. This changed everything. The scanned will was a forgery, but it was also a fake. It held no legal power. It was a document to reassure Bianca. The real targets were the deeds, the house, the bookstore. Those could not be signed with a stamp. They required a live signature, in the presence of a notary. My microphone in the picture frame confirmed it 3 days later. I heard Elise on the phone with Ethan. "The notary is booked for the 23rd, Ethan said, his voice tinny but clear. "He's a friend of the firm. He understands that Victor is an older gentleman and can be forgetful. So he will not ask too many questions," Elise clarified. "He will ask the questions required by law, and he will be satisfied with the answers given." Ethan replied, "Just make sure Victor is in a good mood. We'll present it as the final tax optimization paperwork. He will sign. A fraudulent notarization." They were planning to bring a hired gun, a compromised notary, into the house to trick my father into signing away his properties. I felt a sudden, glacial calm. I had them. I could intervene now. I could call my father, show him the videos, expose the entire plot. It would be messy. There would be tears, denials, gaslighting. Elise would claim I was the one lying, that I was the bitter stepkid. She might even destroy the evidence, shred the documents. No, an engineer does not stop a demolition midway. You let the controlled charges do their work. You let the structure fail along its predetermined weak points. They had to follow through. They had to attempt the crime. I had to gather the evidence of the attempt. I pulled out my phone. I went to a familiar shopping website. I bought a 3-pack of AirTags. When it arrived, I waited for my chance. Elise was always meticulous about her leather briefcase, the one she took to her important meetings with Ethan. One evening, while she was distracted with a caterer on the phone, discussing canapés for Bianca's party, I slipped my hand into her coat pocket. Her keys. I unlocked the briefcase. I found a small, hidden pocket in the silk lining. I slipped the small white disc inside and zipped the pocket shut. I now had her location data. I could provide a perfect, time-stamped log of every trip she made to Ethan's office to coordinate the fraud. I sat back, cross-referencing my evidence folders, the audio from the ladder, the camera footage from the vent, the microphone audio from the desk, Marjorie's financial report on North Pier Limited, the discovery of the scanned signature, the plan for the fraudulent notary, the AirTag, now actively pinging from her briefcase. I had a beautiful, terrible blueprint of their lies. I opened my digital calendar. I looked at the date they had planned for the notary, the 23rd, 2 days after Bianca's birthday party on the 21st. They planned to celebrate and then execute the final signature. I clicked on the event for the 21st. Bianca's 30th birthday. I edited the entry. I added a new title to the private notes, Phase 3 Disclosure. This was the perfect stage. This was the moment of maximum impact. But I knew, with a cold certainty, that it was not enough. Exposing them would be satisfying. Stopping the fraud would be a victory. But it was incomplete. They had revealed a fundamental weakness in my father's defenses. Even if I stopped this, Elise would simply try again, in a different way. I needed to not only stop the demolition, I needed to seize control of the site. I needed to change the ownership of the project itself. I had the evidence to tear them down. Now, I needed a final, heavy blow, a tool that would not just expose them, but would neutralize them, permanently. The word Stepkid was not an insult. It was a technical designation. It was the term that defined my role in the house on the lake, a cold, precise summary of the last 22 years. My mother, Elena, had died when I was 10. It was an aneurysm, a sudden, silent failure of a critical support. One moment she was there, smelling of wood shavings and cinnamon, teaching me how to read a blueprint. The next, she was gone. For 11 months, it was just me and my father, Victor. Two unanchored objects rattling around a house that had become too large and too quiet. Victor, a man who could get lost in the beauty of a 19th century poem, was utterly lost in the logistics of raising a child. Then came Elise. She was a fundraiser for the city library, a woman of sharp angles, perfect posture, and a voice that never wavered. She was organized. She was decisive. She was everything my father was not. He saw a lifeline. I saw a replacement. They were married a year after my mother's death. I was 11. Bianca, her daughter, was 9. Elise never adopted me. It was one of her first, subtle acts of political maneuvering. "Oh, darling, it would be a betrayal of Elena's memory," she had said, her cool, dry hand patting my hair. "You already have a mother in heaven. We will just be a new kind of family." A new kind of family. One with clear, unspoken tears. In public, at school functions or bookstore events, I was my daughter. When Victor was in the room, I was Lexi. But in the quiet, unguarded moments in the kitchen, in the car, in the hallway when it was just Elise and Bianca, I was the Stepkid. It was a weapon, deployed with surgical precision to remind me of my place. "Bianca, you can have the larger room. The Stepkid is used to the smaller one." I cannot be expected to pay for braces for the Stepkid. Her dental structure is adequate. It was a structural designation. I was not part of the primary build. I was an add-on, a renovation, and therefore provisional. This designation defined our financial lives. Christmas was the clearest example. My gifts to the family were my labor, my expertise. I was, after all, the engineer. I gave them solutions. 1 year. It was a full structural reinforcement of the bookstore's sagging second-floor stacks. That was my gift to Victor. Another year. I spent 2 weeks redesigning and rebuilding the back deck of the house, which was rotting. That was my gift to Elise. Their gifts to me were instructions. For 3 Christmases in a row, Elise's present, wrapped in elegant, expensive paper, was a curated collection of unpaid invoices, utility bills for the house, property tax assessments for the bookstore, repair quotes for the plumbing. "You are just so brilliant with these things, Lexi," she would say, her smile never reaching her eyes. "Consider it your household contribution." I paid them. I paid for the privilege of being in the house I was holding up. The most significant drain was Bianca. Bianca, as Elise's biological child, was the legacy. She had to be positioned. That meant a private preparatory school, one with a tuition that rivaled a small university. It is an investment in our future, Elise had explained to Victor over dinner, her voice a symphony of stressed reason. It is just the cost. It is astronomical. We will have to pull from the bookstore's capital. I was 24. Iron Light Renovations had just landed its first major municipal contract. I was flush with my first real success. I can cover it, I said. It felt like the right thing to do, the strong thing to do. Elise's eyes lit up, not with gratitude, but with the cold click of a latch engaging. Lexi, you would... That is wonderful. It can be a family scholarship, you sponsoring your sister's education. For 4 years, I paid for that family scholarship. I paid for Bianca's private school blazer, her lacrosse stick, her assumptions of superiority. I paid for her to learn how to look down on people like me, people who worked with their hands. It was the money from my concrete pours and foundation repairs that bought her the class she now wore like a shield. These memories were surfacing as I stood on a job site. 2 nights after planting the microphone, it was 3 a.m. We were doing an emergency stabilization of a university library's foundation. It was bitterly cold, maybe 20 degrees, and the wind off the lake was a physical force, screaming through the exposed rebar. I was checking the torque on a tension rod, my face numb, my fingers aching inside my gloves. The wind whistled through a gap in the steel, and it sounded just like her voice. Stepkid, Stepkid, this is where I belonged, in the cold, in the dark, fixing the failures of others, while they sat in the warmth of the house I had repaired, drinking wine and plotting to have me removed. I leaned my helmet against a cold steel I-beam. I felt a surge, not of heat, but of ice, a cold, structural clarity. My revenge would not be a messy, emotional collapse. I would not scream. I would not cry. I would not give them the satisfaction of a hysterical stepdaughter. My revenge would be a controlled demolition. It would be based on truth. It would be executed by the letter of the law. I would present my evidence, the audio, the video, the money trail, and I would let their own conspiracy be the force that pulled them down. And I made a silent promise no one else would get hurt. Bianca had a 2-year-old son. He was a non-combatant. He would be shielded. My war was with the architects of the fraud, not with the children, with this vow. I returned to my office. I had the evidence of their plan, but I was still missing the final, heavy blow, the leverage, the thing that would not just stop them, but would permanently shift the balance of power. I was looking for a hidden structural element they had not accounted for. And then, a memory, thin as spider silk, floated into my mind. It was from years ago, right after Victor married Elise. We were in the attic, going through boxes of my mother's things. Victor held up a small, intricately carved wooden box. "This was your grandmother's," he said, his voice thick with nostalgia. "Eleanor Finch, my mother-in-law, she was formidable," he smiled, a sad, distant expression. "She never trusted anyone, least of all banks, but she set something small aside for you, a little trust fund. She said it was for when you were mature enough to handle it, not of legal age, mature." We had never spoken of it again. Years later, when I was in my first year of engineering school, broke and living on instant noodles, I had asked Elise about it. She had waved her hand, a gesture of effortless dismissal. "Oh, that, yes, Victor mentioned it. It was a tiny account. Lexi, a few $100s. I think the paperwork was a complete mess. It all got lost when we consolidated the bank accounts after the wedding. Honestly, it has probably been dissolved by the state by now. It is nothing to worry about." Lost, dissolved, nothing. Elise, the woman who balanced her checkbook to the penny, the woman who itemized every receipt, did not lose financial documents. She buried them. My fingers went cold. I turned to my computer. My mother's family, the Finches, were from Door County. They had owned cherry orchards. My grandmother, Eleanor, was not a little woman. She was pragmatic, tough, and had a deep suspicion of performative charm. She had looked at Elise at the wedding like she was analyzing a crack in a foundation. I had no account numbers. I had no bank name. I just had a county. I started making calls. Good morning. I am trying to locate a trust established by an Eleanor Finch for the benefit of her granddaughter, Lexi Rivera. I spent 3 hours navigating automated menus and speaking to skeptical bank officers, privacy laws, dead ends. Finally, I was transferred to a small, independent trust company in Sturgeon Bay. The trust officer was a man named Mr. Holtz, and his voice sounded like dry leaves. Finch, he said, drawing the word out. Eleonora Finch. Yes, ma'am. We manage that trust. The Finch Legacy Trust. We have been waiting for you to call. My breath caught. You have... Yes. Mrs. Finch's instructions were very specific. We were not to make contact with you, the beneficiary, until you initiated it yourself, or upon your 35th birthday. You are a couple of years early. I was told, I said, my voice tight, that it was a very small account, that it might have been dissolved. Mr. Holtz let out a dry chuckle. Small no, Ms. Rivera. Eleanor Finch did not do small. She was not a woman who trusted stocks or bonds. She trusted the land. He paused, and I heard the click of a keyboard. When your father, Victor, decided to open his bookstore, Eleanor provided a significant portion of the seed money, not for the business, for the property. I gripped the edge of my desk. My knuckles were white. What? What do you mean? She did not give him a loan, Mr. Holtz said, his voice clear and precise. She made an investment. She took an equity stake, the Finch Legacy Trust, of which you are the sole and current beneficiary, owns 20% of the commercial real estate property located at, and he read me the address of the Quill Compass. I could not breathe. 20%, not of the failing bookstore, 20% of the prime commercial real estate that Elise and Ethan were planning to liquidate. Ms. Rivera, there is more, he continued, sensing my shock. Your grandmother was a very cautious woman. She included a stringent fiduciary clause in the trust's charter. I heard the rustle of heavy paper. Ah, here it is. In the event that the majority property holder, that is your father, enters into any agreement under duress, fraudulent misrepresentation, or in bad faith that endangers the asset or the trust's stake, the trust is hereby empowered and required to activate an independent legal counsel to protect its 20% interest, with full power to seek immediate injunctions and claw back any such fraudulent agreements. A clawback clause, a legal trigger, a poison pill. My grandmother, dead for 22 years, had seen this coming. She had seen Elise. Mr. Holtz, I said, my voice a whisper. I have proof. I have proof of exactly that. Fraudulent misrepresentation. How do I activate it? Eleanor thought of that, too, he said. The original, signed trust charter, the physical deed certificates, and a personal letter to you are not held here at the bank. We only manage the financial end. The keys to the kingdom, as she called them, are in a safe deposit box. Also in your name. At your bank? No, at the old North Shore Lake House, that seasonal resort just outside of town. Eleanor loved that place. She paid the box rental fee for 50 years in advance. She left a directive with us, a message for you, should you ever call. What is the message? It is just 3 words, Mr. Holtz said. It says, behind the pike. I hung up the phone. My entire body was vibrating. Behind the pike, I knew exactly what it meant. In my father's study, the one Elise had filled with her tasteful, sterile decor. One object had remained, by my father's ironclad decree, on the wall, above the fireplace, was a large, dusty, taxidermied northern pike, mounted on a weathered piece of driftwood. My mother and my grandmother had caught it together on a fishing trip. The year before I was born, Elise hated it. She said it was ghastly. I grabbed my keys. I was not waiting for the weekend. I was going to Door County now. It was a 3-hour drive, and the sky was turning a heavy, threatening gray. But it did not matter. I had to stop at the house first. I had to retrieve the key. Elise and Ethan thought they had found a loophole to remove the Stepkid. They had no idea that the Stepkid owned a foundational, load-bearing 20% of the entire structure they were trying to steal. The game had just changed. I didn't bother knocking. I used my old key, the one Elise had been trying to get back for years. I walked in, stamping the snow from my boots. Elise and Bianca were in the living room, heads bent over glossy catering brochures, debating the merits of prosciutto-wrapped melon versus bacon-wrapped dates for Bianca's party. They looked up, annoyed by the interruption. "Lexi, you're tracking in slush," Elise said, her voice tight. "Just need to grab a book from Dad's study," I said, already moving past them. "He's not there. He's at the store." "I know. It's one of my old engineering textbooks." I didn't wait for a response. I walked into the study and closed the door behind me, leaving it open just a crack. The air was still, smelling of old paper and Elise's lemon polish, and there it was, on the wall, the northern pike. It was a magnificent, ugly, defiant thing, its glass eyes staring blankly, its mouth open in a permanent, toothy snarl. I reached up, my hand shaking just slightly, and felt behind the driftwood mount. My fingers brushed against a small, flat piece of tape. Stuck to the back of the wood was a thin, old-fashioned brass key. It was attached to a small, yellowed paper tag. On the tag, in my grandmother's spidery, iron-willed handwriting, was one word: North Shore. I slipped it into my pocket. I walked out of the study. "Find what you were looking for?" Bianca asked, not looking up from a page of miniature cheesecakes. "I always do," I said. I was out the door before they could respond. The drive to Door County was a hypnotic blur of gray highway and snow-covered cherry orchards. The lake, to my right, was a vast expanse of dark, churning water, the color of wet slate. It was not frozen yet, but it was angry, the whitecaps looking like teeth. The air was thick with the promise of more snow. The North Shore Lake House was not a resort. It was a collection of faded, 1950s-era cabins and a main lodge that smelled of damp wood smoke and old coffee. It was closed for the season, but the owner, a grizzled man who looked as old as the lodge itself, lived in the back. I showed him my driver's license. He looked at the name, nodded, and took a key from a dusty board. "Your grandmother paid up for 50 years, he said, his voice a gravelly rumble. "She was a smart one. Said you'd be by eventually, though she figured you for 35. "I'm a fast learner," I said. He led me down a cold, concrete block hallway into the basement. The air was freezing. He pointed to a wall of old metal safe deposit boxes. "Number 42. He handed me his key. "My key and your key. Takes both." He inserted his key, turned it, and then left me. Privacy. I slid my brass key into the second lock. It resisted for a moment, the metal cold and stiff, then turned with a satisfying, heavy thunk. I pulled the long tin box out. It was heavy. I took it to a small, bare table under a single, flickering fluorescent bulb. I sat down and lifted the lid. It was not a box of money. It was an arsenal. On top was a thick envelope made of heavy, cream-colored stationery. My name was written on it, in that same iron script. Inside was a letter, 3 pages, handwritten. "My dearest Lexi," it began. "If you are reading this, I am gone, and you are in trouble. Do not trust the woman your father married. She is a facade with a weak foundation. Your father is a good man, but he sees poetry where he should see contracts. This is not a flaw. It is a vulnerability." My eyes scanned the page, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I have not left you wealth, child. I have left you leverage. The world will try to tell you that you are a guest in your own life. Do not listen. You are not a guest. You are a cornerstone. I have insured it. She detailed the trust, the 20% equity stake in the bookstore property, but there was more. He will, I am sure, try to sell it one day, or she will try to sell it for him. The trust gives you right of first refusal. They cannot sell it to anyone, at any price, until they have offered it to you in writing first, at the same price. A right of first refusal. It meant they were legally shackled to me. Beneath the letter were the official, gold-sealed certificates, the deed partition, clearly stating the Finch Legacy Trust's 20% ownership, the original trust charter, with the clawback for bad faith clause highlighted in my grandmother's own yellowing ink. And at the very bottom of the box, there was one last thing, a single, crisp business card, attached to a memorandum. The card read, Gideon Walsh, Esco, Fiduciary Estate Law. The memo underneath was short. If a lease attempts to merge, leverage, or sell the asset without your consent, or if you suspect your father is being defrauded, call this man. He has his instructions. He is paid from the trust, not by you. He works for me, and by extension, he works for you. I sat in that freezing basement for 10 minutes. I did not cry. I felt a cold, clean, diamond-hard clarity. The truth was not water, it was ice, solid, sharp, and capable of breaking whatever was put against it. I pulled out my phone and my portable pocket scanner. In the dim fluorescent light, I meticulously scanned every single page, the letter, the deeds, the trust charter, Gideon's card. I created encrypted PDFs. I uploaded them to the same secure cloud server where the audio and video files were stored. I made a separate copy on an encrypted USB drive, which I put in my pocket. Then, sitting in the cab of my truck, the engine running, the heater blasting, I made the call. The number on the 22-year-old card was still active. A voice answered, as dry and precise as Mr. Holtz's. Walsh, Law. Mr. Gideon Walsh, I asked. Speaking. My name is Lexi Rivera. I am Eleanor Finch's granddaughter. I'm calling about the Finch Legacy Trust. I have reason to believe the bad faith clause is in the process of being triggered. There was a long silence. I heard the faint scratch of a pen. I have been waiting for this call for a very long time. Ms. Rivera, I have my instructions. What do you have? I have video and audio evidence of a conspiracy to defraud my father, Victor Rivera, of the asset. I have evidence of a shell LLC created by the opposing party's legal counsel, Ethan Marlowe. I have financial statements showing structured transfers. And I have audio of their plan to execute a fraudulent notarization in 2 weeks. Another silence. This one was shorter. I think I heard him smile. My goodness, you are indeed Eleanor's granddaughter. You have done my job for me. What are your instructions? I don't want to stop them yet, I said. I want them to proceed with the attempt, but I want a safety net. I need you to place a flag, an immediate notary alert, and a title alert on all properties associated with Victor Rivera in Milwaukee County. I want any attempted filing to be immediately frozen, pending review. A preliminary injunction based on suspected fraud. Yes, that is precisely what the trust allows for. It will be done within the hour. One more thing. Mr. Walsh, send a blind courtesy copy of the alert to Ethan Marlowe's office. No mention of the trust, no mention of my name, just an official flag from an interested party. I want him to sweat, but I do not want him to know where the heat is coming from. I like how you think, Ms. Rivera. Consider it done. I hung up and immediately dialed my accountant. Marjorie, Lexi, what did you find on North Pier Limited? I was just about to call you, she said. It is not just a holding account. The incorporation papers list real estate investment and leveraging as its business purpose, and 5 days ago, an application was filed by Elise Rivera for a home equity line of credit against your father's primary residence, a HELOC, for the maximum possible amount. The bank is currently processing it. The intended recipient of the funds, North Pier Limited. Of course, that was the final move. Steal the equity from the house and funnel it into their private shell company before they even sold the bookstore. The timeline was now crystal clear. Bianca's party, the final celebration. The notary, the crime. The HELOC, the getaway. My plan was solid, but it needed to be devastating. I drove to an electronics store. I bought a Pico projector, the kind that fits in your pocket and connects to a smartphone. That night, in my office, I built my presentation. I did not write a script. I built a case. I titled the slide deck, Blueprint of Lies. Slide 1. The audio file from the ladder. She's just the Stepkid. Slide 2. A flowchart. Simple and brutal. Victor's accounts. North Pier Limited. Ethan Marlowe. With Marjorie's exact numbers. Slide 3. A map. The AirTag data from Elise's briefcase, showing her repeated, secret trips to Ethan's office. Slide 4. The audio file from the desk. He will sign. He trusts his wife. Slide 5. The scanned, forged will, next to a real signature from Victor. Slide 6. The big one. A scanned image of the Finch Legacy Trust deed, the 20%, and the clawback for bad faith clause, in giant, red letters. I then made 2 calls. The first was to an old college friend, Sarah, who was now a senior credit risk investigator for a major national bank. "Sarah, it's Lexi," I said. "I know this is last minute, but are you free for a birthday party this Saturday? It will be educational. I am about to blow the whistle on an active, high-level attempt at asset fraud, and I thought your office might want a front-row seat to see how it's done." Sarah, who lived for this kind of thing, just laughed. "I would not miss it for the world. Send me the address." My second call was to Gideon Walsh. "Mr. Walsh, the party is Saturday. I want you to file the official preliminary warning on Friday at 4 p.m. Let it land on Ethan's desk right before the weekend. Give him 2 days to wonder who he's up against." My final move was the fail-safe. I printed a full, hard copy of the trust documents, the deed, the clawback clause, and a cover letter from Gideon Walsh explaining the trust's legal standing. I put it all in a thick, 9x12 manila envelope. I sealed it with wax, like my grandmother would have. I addressed it to the chief of the white-collar crime division at the Milwaukee County District Attorney's Office. I marked it personal and confidential to be opened by addressee only. I sent it via bonded courier, with instructions for it to be logged, signed for, and held, a legal time bomb, sitting quietly on a government shelf. When all this was done, it was almost midnight. I drove back to my father's house. The lights I had hung were blazing, bright and festive, but as I pulled into the drive, I saw one string, high up on the second-story gable, had come loose and was dangling in the wind. I sighed. I pulled the ladder from my truck. I climbed up into the freezing, silent night, and with steady hands, I clipped the last light firmly into place. The facade had to be perfect. The night before the party, Elise insisted on a quiet family dinner. These dinners were never quiet. They were command performances, opportunities for Elise and Bianca to reinforce the family hierarchy, and for Ethan to practice his pitches. The dining room, which I had repainted myself 2 summers ago in a Tuscan gold that Elise had picked, felt warm and suffocating. The air was heavy with the smell of roasting garlic and Elise's expensive, funereal perfume. Ethan, seated at the head of the table in Victor's chair, was holding court. He had this way of speaking using his hands to draw invisible, important boxes in the air that was meant to convey intellectual dominance. He was talking, as he always did, about his work, which he framed as a form of noble, complex artistry. "The problem with most estates," he proclaimed, swirling a glass of red wine he had brought, "is a lack of structural transparency. People are sentimental. They see a house, a business. I see an asset portfolio. I see inefficiencies." Victor, oblivious, beamed at him. "It's just fascinating. Ethan, truly. All this time, I've just been running a bookstore, and that's the poetry of it." "Victor," Ethan said, his voice dripping with condescension, You provide the poetry. I provide the architecture. What Elise and I are doing is simply a restructuring. We're moving the assets from a high exposure, high tax position into a more streamlined, efficient vehicle. It's about minimizing your footprint. It's about clarity. Clarity. He used that word a lot. His version of clarity was a fog of legal jargon. Elise, playing the part of the gracious hostess, reached over and patted my hand. Her skin was cool and dry, her rings hard against my knuckles, and we are so grateful. Lexi, that you're letting us handle all this dull paperwork. You work so terribly hard at that workshop of yours. You shouldn't have to worry about these complicated financial matters. The workshop that had paid for the new hardwood floors they were sitting on. It's no trouble, I said, my voice perfectly even. Speaking of which, Bianca chimed in, lifting her glass. We have to toast Ethan. We just got back from Napa. A little pre-birthday celebration. Oh, how was it? Victor asked, genuinely interested. It was divine, Bianca said, her eyes finding mine over the rim of her glass. It was a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. We stayed at Auberge. Ethan's firm has a corporate membership. It's amazing what a little financial restructuring can do for your travel budget. We're finally optimizing our lives. I smiled. A tight, brief, engineer's smile. I'm glad you had fun. Victor, bless his heart, was in his own world. The holiday rush at the store has been wonderful. We sold out of the new Sally Rooney in 2 days. 2 days. The new espresso machine is a hit. We're doing just fine. Just fine. He was a man admiring the new paint while the foundation was being hollowed out from underneath him. I had brought dessert, a pecan tart, my mother's recipe. I stood and began to clear the plates. I'll get the tart, I said. And coffee? The kitchen, the one I had redesigned and rebuilt, was my territory. The marble countertops I had installed felt cold and solid under my palms. As I cut the tart, the rich, sweet smell of toasted butter and pecans filled the room. It was a smell of realness, of honesty, in a house built on lies. While the coffee was brewing, I moved to the spice rack near the stove. It was a messy, 3-tiered thing Elise never organized. I had noticed it earlier. Under the cover of finding the cinnamon for the coffee, I slipped a small, magnetic audio recorder, no bigger than a tube of lip balm, onto the metal underside of the rack's top shelf. It was perfectly hidden, angled toward the kitchen island where Elise and Ethan had gathered while I plated the tart. Victor had gone to his study to find a book for Bianca. The 3 of them were alone. I kept my back to them, focusing on the espresso machine. He's in a good mood, Elise murmured to Ethan, her voice low and sharp, stripped of its hostess velvet. The new microphone was excellent. The notary is confirmed for the 23rd 10 in the morning. Ethan replied, his voice a clipped business tone. He knows the drill. We just need Victor's signature on the deed transfer and the HELOC papers. Get those 2 things signed, and then we cut the Stepkid out completely. The new will and the trust documents are already drafted to exclude her. Once she has no legal claim to him, she has no reason to see the books. My hands did not shake. I continued to arrange the slices of tart on Elise's wedding china. Ethan, darling, Elise said, let's not mention North Pier Limited, not in front of Victor. It's a cleaner narrative if we just call it the family trust. Of course, Ethan said. He doesn't need the details. He just needs to sign. Bianca, who had been silent, finally spoke. Her voice was as cold as the marble. It's for the best. He's incapable of making hard decisions. We're protecting him, and law is law. Lexi, feelings don't matter in estate planning. I turned, holding the tray of desserts, my face a mask of pleasant neutrality. Did you say something? Bianca. She just sneered. I said, it looks delicious. You're so domestic. I served the tart. I poured the coffee. We sat. We ate. I listened to them discuss the weather, the wine, the thread count of the sheets at the Napa Hotel. Every bite of my tart tasted like ash. After 10 minutes, I excused myself. I'm just going to use the guest bathroom. I walked down the hall. I went into the bathroom, locked the door, and turned on the tap. I stood in the silent, empty room for a full minute, breathing. I did not go to the bathroom. I went to the kitchen. It was empty. It took me 5 seconds. I reached under the spice rack, retrieved the recorder, and slipped it into my pocket. In its place, I put a fresh one, with a new memory card. They were still at the table, laughing at one of Victor's stories. I went back to the hall and into the bathroom. I flushed the toilet, washed my hands, and rejoined them at the table. "Everything all right?" Lexi Elise asked. "Perfectly," I said. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A text message. I glanced at it under the table. It was from a number I did not recognize, but I knew who it was from. Gideon Walsh. The message was one sentence. "Warning of fiduciary interest filed and delivered to all parties. All attempted notarizations at Milwaukee County on R.E. Rivera, V, are now flagged for automatic suspension pending judicial review." It was done. The trap was set. The warning shot had been fired. Landing on Ethan's desk at 4:50 p.m. on a Friday, he would have seen it. He would be spending the entire party tomorrow wondering who he was up against, who the interested party was. He would be off balance. And he would be desperate to get those papers signed on the 23rd, before this unknown entity could move against him. I put my phone away. I finished my tart. As the dinner wound down, Elise walked me to the door. We stood on the porch. Under the lights I had hung, the wind was picking up again, and the string I had refastened was holding strong. "The lights do look lovely." "Lexi," Elise said, pulling her cashmere wrap tighter. "Although, that string on the gable, it still looks uneven. It's slightly off-center." She was pointing to the one I had fixed. She was a woman obsessed with appearances, with the facade. I looked up at the lights, and then back at her. Her face was a mask of polite concern. "You're right," I said, my voice quiet, almost conversational. "It's almost impossible to get a straight line when the center is crooked. No matter how hard you try, if the center is off, every single light looks wrong." She stared at me, her head tilted, searching for the meaning. She found nothing. She saw only the Stepkid. "Well," she said, dismissing it, "try to fix it before the party, will you? We want everything to be perfect." "Oh, I will," I said, walking to my truck. "I guarantee, by the end of tomorrow, everything will be perfectly, finally, straight." The house was a stage, and Elise was its star. She had filled it with people, with champagne, with the smell of expensive perfume and catered food. This was her audience, the one she had curated for 20 years. Ethan's junior partner colleagues, looking to impress. Elise's coterie of high society friends, their jewelry glinting in the soft light. Affluent customers from the bookstore, unaware they were drinking on the proceeds of its slow liquidation. This was the world they had built, and the one they were celebrating. My guests arrived one by one. Ghosts at the feast. I met Sarah, my old college friend, at the door. "Lexi," she said, giving me a solid, professional hug. Her eyes, the eyes of a senior credit risk investigator, were already sweeping the room, calculating the value of the art, the silver, the sheer square footage. Quite the party. "Just wait," I murmured. "My other friend is by the bar. Mr. Davies." Sarah glanced over. Mr. Davies, from the county assessor's office, looked like a perfectly harmless, slightly bored accountant, nursing a club soda. He was, in fact, an expert in document forgery. He nodded at me, a tiny, almost imperceptible acknowledgement. They blended seamlessly. My father was radiant. He was standing near the grand piano, his face lit with a pure, naive joy that broke my heart. "It is all so wonderful," he was telling a small group. "Elise and Ethan are just wizards with all the details. We have some big plans for after Christmas, a major restructuring, securing the future, you know." He had no idea. He was the man on the deck of the Titanic, admiring the chandeliers. Elise was a blur of champagne-colored silk, a perfect hostess, her smile fixed, her voice a musical laugh. She touched arms, refilled glasses, accepted compliments on her house, her taste, She was magnificent in her deception. I watched Ethan. He was the picture of a man without a care in the world. He was circulating, his hand on Bianca's back, accepting congratulations for his new suit, his wife's birthday, his success in optimizing my father's life. He checked his phone, a quick, dismissive glance at his email. He was not looking for trouble. He was looking for a confirmation from the compromised notary he had scheduled for Monday. Finding none. He put the phone away and took another drink. He was utterly, arrogantly unaware of the judicial flag from Gideon Walsh that was already sitting in the county's system, a digital tripwire just waiting for him to touch it. Elise had arranged the seating for dinner. Of course, a long baronial table, glittering with crystal. She had placed me halfway down, an afterthought, neutralized between a dull cousin and one of Ethan's silent partners, Bianca. As the birthday girl was at one end of the table, my father was at the other. I found my place card. Lexi Rivera. I picked it up. I walked to the head of the table, the seat of power, the one directly opposite my father. I took the place card that read Bianca and walked it back to my assigned, mediocre seat and set it down. Then I returned to the head of the table and placed my own card there. The guests were filing in. Bianca, seeing the switch, stopped. Her face, flushed with champagne and adulation, tightened. Lexi, what do you think you're doing? That is my seat. Elise, right behind her, froze. A small, silent ripple of tension spread through the room. I looked at Bianca, my voice low and calm, but it carried in the sudden quiet. You are the birthday girl, Bianca. You should be in the center of the table, where everyone can celebrate you. I gestured to the seat I had given her. This seat, I said, indicating my own, is just structural. It holds up the end. It suits me. It was a challenge wrapped in a compliment. She could not argue without looking petty. The facade of the perfect party was at risk. Elise, ever the director, made a split-second calculation. Of course, Elise said, her voice a brittle, bright melody. She guided Bianca to the new seat. Lexi is just being so practical. I sat. I was now at the head of the table. I had a clear line of sight to my father. I could see Elise, her smile strained, her eyes like chips of ice. I could see Ethan, who shot me a look of baffled contempt. I could see every guest who mattered. The dinner was a performance. They talked about skiing in Vail. They talked about portfolio diversification. They talked about nothing. I ate. I listened. I was a spectator, a structural engineer waiting for the scheduled demolition. Finally, the plates were cleared. The lights dimmed. The caterers emerged with a towering, 3-tiered cake, 30 candles blazing. Everyone sang. Bianca, restored to her role, beamed and blew out the flames to a roar of applause. Champagne was poured for the toasts. Victor stood, his glass high. To my beautiful Bianca, and to my wonderful wife, Elise, and my brilliant son-in-law, Ethan, for taking such good care of our future. Elise and Ethan smiled, soaking in the applause. Then, I stood up. The room quieted. This was not on the program. I was holding my champagne flute. I would like to propose a toast as well, I said. My voice was clear. It was steady. It cut through the warm, wine-soaked air. I would like to toast the things that hold us all up, the things we do not see, the things we take for credit, and the things we take for granted. I raised my glass higher. I looked at Elise. I looked at Bianca. To the truth, I said, and to load-bearing love, the kind that actually does the work. I drank. The room, confused, murmured and drank with me. And, I continued, setting my glass down, in honor of Bianca's birthday and this new era of family transparency, I have put together a small presentation, a look at the restructuring Ethan has been working on. Before Elise could form an objection, I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the Peacock projector. I set it on the table and aimed it at the large, blank, cream-colored wall of the dining room. A beam of light shot out. A single, stark white slide appeared, with black, Block letters. Slide 1. Blueprint of lies. A collective, indrawn breath. Lexi, my father said, his voice a confused tremor. What is this? Just a little housekeeping, Dad, I said. I pressed the button on my phone, which was synced to the projector. The slide vanished, replaced by a black screen. And then, audio filled the room. My audio. The recording from the ladder. She's just the stepkid. Bianca's voice, sharp and cold, echoed in the sudden, dead silence. Not after what the lawyer found. Elise's voice, smooth and venomous. The room was a tomb. Bianca's face was a mask of white horror. Elise's hand, holding her champagne flute, began to tremble. Lexi, turn this off. Right now, Elise commanded, her voice a low hiss. I am just getting started, I said. I clicked to the next slide. Slide 2. A flowchart. It was simple. It was brutal. At the top, 2 boxes, the Quill Compass operating account and Victor Rivera's home equity, arrows pointed from both, funneling down to a series of smaller boxes, all dated, all for amounts just under $9,000. All those arrows pointed to one, large, central box, North Pier Limited, LLC, and from that box, a single, final arrow pointed to a name, beneficiary Ethan Marlowe. This is slander, Ethan shouted, jumping to his feet. This is libelous. Is it, Ethan? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. My forensic accountant, Marjorie Hale, traced the IP address of the LLC's filing to your law firm. She traced the structured deposits from my father's accounts. It is a felony. I believe... Sarah, my friend, spoke up, her voice suddenly devoid of all warmth. Mr. Marlowe, I am a credit risk investigator. Structuring payments to avoid federal reporting thresholds is a serious crime. My office will be very interested in this data. Ethan's head snapped toward her. His face, which had been red with bluster, turned a pale, sickly gray. I don't know what that is, Bianca whispered, her eyes wide with panic, looking to Ethan. Oh, you do, I said. I clicked again. Slide 3. A map of Milwaukee. A red, incriminating line tracked the location of Elise's briefcase, from her tennis club to her salon, and over again, to one address, Ethan's office building. The dates and times were stamped on the map. These, I said, as still frames from the study camera populated the screen, are from the strategy sessions at the house, the ones where you planned to cut the stepkid out. You spied on me, Elise whispered, her voice shaking with rage. In my own home. You plotted to steal my father's home. In his home, I corrected. I clicked again. Slide 4. This was the heaviest. It was a scanned image of a legal document, the letterhead of Gideon Walsh, Esquire, and while highlighted in a bright, angry yellow, the clawback for bad faith clause from my grandmother's trust. What? What is that? Victor whispered. He looked like he was going to be sick. That, Dad, I said, my voice softening as I looked only at him, is from my other grandmother, Elena's mother. It seems she left me something. She left me 20% of the bookstore property, and she left that clause. It says that if any fraudulent action is taken against the asset, the trust's lawyer, Mr. Walsh, is empowered to void the entire transaction and seek damages. Ethan's face was a mask of disbelief. 20%. That is impossible. It is not on the county title. It is on the original deed. Ethan, I said, the one filed in Door County. You are a good lawyer, Ethan, but you are a sloppy researcher. I turned back to my father. He was shaking his head, his eyes on Elise. Elise, a new will you. You told me it was just a small update. You told me... He is confused. Lexi, look what you are doing to him, Elise shrieked, finally finding her voice. He is not confused. He is trusting, I said, which is why you thought you could do this. I clicked to my final slide. It was a side-by-side comparison. On the left, a check Victor had signed to the bookstore's coffee supplier last week. On the right, the signature page of the new will, the one that made Bianca the sole heir. The signatures were not just similar, they were pixel for pixel identical. "You did not even bother to have him sign it, did you, Elise?" I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to fill the room. "You just used a scan, a stamp. You forged it. You did not think the Stepkid would be looking." I turned off the projector. The wall went blank. I turned to my father in the sudden, heavy silence. "Dad?" I asked, my voice gentle. "Did you sign this document, this new will, leaving everything to Bianca, cutting me out, and giving Elise full control of the bookstore?" Victor stared at the blank wall, then at Elise. His face, once so full of joy, was a gray, crumbling ruin. He looked at his wife of 22 years. "No," he whispered. "No, I never signed that." "Thank you," I said. Then, Mr. Davies, my quiet friend from the county, stood up. He placed his napkin on the table and cleared his throat. He did not look like a high school teacher anymore. "Mrs. Rivera, Mr. Marlowe," he said, his voice calm, clear, and official. "I am an investigator with the county assessor's office, specializing in fraudulent filings, based on the evidence Ms. Rivera has presented, and an official alert already placed on this property. I can confirm that any attempt to file a deed transfer, such as the one you have scheduled for Monday, will be immediately and automatically suspended, and as of this moment, your father's signature is now part of an active forgery investigation." Ethan's face was a canvas of processed shock. The bluster, the arrogance, the practiced ease of the suburban lawyer, it all dissolved, leaving something pale and pinched. He looked at Mr. Davies, then at Sarah, then at me. "This is slander," he spat. His voice was too loud, too sharp. He was performing for the guests, who were frozen in their seats. "This is a theatrical, defamatory attack. You have no proof. These are manufactured documents. You forged that trust. You fabricated these numbers." He was trying to regain control, to paint me as the hysterical, vengeful woman. I did not respond to him. I looked toward the kitchen doorway, where a woman had been standing quietly, watching. "Marjorie," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through his tirade. "Would you come in? Please." Marjorie Hale, my forensic accountant, stepped into the dining room. She was in her late 60s, wearing a severe, impeccably tailored charcoal suit. She carried a thick leather valise. She looked, as she always did, like she was about to fail an audit on the entire world. "Who in God's name is this?" Elise hissed, her eyes darting between me and this new, unwelcome character. "This," I said, "is Ms. Marjorie Hale. She is a certified forensic accountant. She is the one who found North Pier Limited. She is the one who traced the structured payments from my father's accounts. She is the one who located the IP address from your firm. Ethan." "Marjorie, is this report fabricated?" Marjorie walked to the dining table. She did not look at any of the guests. She opened her valise, withdrew a single, spiral-bound report, at least 200 pages thick, and placed it on the white linen tablecloth in front of Ethan. It landed with a heavy, definitive thud. "That," Marjorie said, her voice as dry as old paper, "is the official, notarized audit. Page 94 details the 7 separate wire transfers, all coded as consulting fees or property management, all originating from the Quill Compass operating account, and all terminating in the Delaware-based LLC, North Pier, which Mr. Marlowe filed 3 months ago. The timeline of these transfers correlates exactly with the optimization meetings you recorded. The routing numbers are, of course, included. It is all there." Ethan stared at the report as if it were a coiled snake. His legalistic arrogance shattered, replaced by the silent, cold panic of a man who has been, in full view of his peers, completely and professionally checkmated. Elise saw him falter. She saw the facade cracking, and she rushed in to spackle it, her voice high and trembling. This is a misunderstanding. It's just a tax arrangement. It is complicated. Yes, but it is not. It is not illegal. Ethan was just helping us prepare the assets. It is just housekeeping. Housekeeping, I repeated. The word was flat, dead in my mouth. Preparing the assets for what, Elise? For the day you could finally cut the Stepkid out. I still had the remote in my hand. I pressed the button. The projector was off. The wall was blank. But the audio connection was still live. And the sound that filled the room was not from the vent. It was from the spice rack. It was from last night. It was crystal clear. Elise's voice. He knows the drill. We just need Victor's signature on the deed transfer and the HELOC papers. Ethan's voice. Get those two things signed, and then we cut the Stepkid out completely. The new will and the trust documents are already drafted to exclude her. Once she has no legal claim to him, she has no reason to see the books. A collective, horrified gasp from the guests. Elise's junior partner friends looked like they had been slapped. This was not slander. This was not an interpretation. This was a conspiracy, in their own voices. I turned to my father. Victor was holding on to the edge of the table, his knuckles white. He was not looking at me. He was staring at Elise. His face was gray, slack with a shock so profound it looked like a physical injury. He looked at the woman he had trusted, the woman who had managed his entire life for 22 years. Elise. His voice was not a question. It was not an accusation. It was the sound of a support beam snapping. The sound of a man realizing the entire foundation of his world was hollow. You cut her out, Bianca erupted. The panic, the champagne, the humiliation, it all detonated at once. She stood up, knocking her champagne flute over. Red wine spilled across the white tablecloth like an arterial spray. It was him, she shrieked, pointing a shaking diamond-ringed finger at her husband. It was his idea, all of it. The LLC, the will, the trust. He said it was standard. He said it was how wealthy families manage their assets. He told us it was legal. Ethan looked at his wife, his face a mask of cold contempt. He told you it was legal. Bianca, I asked, my voice dangerously soft. And what about this? I pressed the button again. A new audio file. This one from the vent. From the very first night I had planted the camera. Bianca's voice. It's ridiculous. Why are we even pretending she's just the Stepkid? I let the words hang, and then I played the second clip. From the kitchen. From last night. Bianca's voice. It's for the best. He's incapable of making hard decisions. We're protecting him. And law is law. Lexi, feelings don't matter in estate planning. I stopped the recording. The silence in the room was absolute. You were not a victim in this, Bianca, I said, my voice as cold and precise as a scalpel. You were a willing partner. You were protecting your legacy. You were protecting your trips to Napa. Bianca collapsed back into her chair, her mouth open, a silent, choking sob. Mr. Davies, the county investigator, stood up. He placed his napkin neatly by his plate. Mr. Marlowe, Mrs. Rivera, he said, his voice now devoid of any partygoer pleasantry. Given the audio evidence of clear and premeditated intent to defraud, coupled with the forged signature on the will, I am confirming that all transactions, actual or pending, related to these properties are now frozen by my office, effective immediately. Sarah, the credit investigator, added her own nail to the coffin. And that home equity line of credit application, consider it officially denied. My bank has a zero-tolerance policy for being used as a vehicle for suspected elder fraud and asset stripping. We will be flagging your names in our system. The HELOC, that was the magic word. Ethan finally truly understood. His face went blank. The fight was gone. He saw the trap, and he was in it. No HELOC meant no immediate cash, no payday, no liquidation. His entire scheme, the North Pier LLC, the months of planning, It was all built on an asset he could not touch. And even if you had succeeded, I said, my voice cutting through the rising murmur of the horrified guests. I looked directly at Ethan. Even if you had fooled the notary, even if you had tricked my father into signing those deeds, it would have been worthless. I picked up Marjorie's thick spiral-bound report. I tapped the cover, where I had placed a copy of the Finch Trust deed. This 20% stake from my grandmother's trust. It is not just ownership, Ethan. It comes with a controlling interest. It includes a veto power over any sale or leveraging of the entire asset. You cannot sell the bookstore. You cannot restructure the properties. You cannot optimize a single dollar of equity, now or ever, without my explicit, written signature. He was finished. He was a lawyer, and he knew what that meant. He was shackled to me. But Elise was not a lawyer. She was a cornered animal. The sophisticated hostess was gone, stripped away, revealing something raw and vibrating with rage. Her eyes, wild and dark, found mine. "You!" she screamed. Her voice was a ragged shriek, a sound no one in that room had ever heard. You ungrateful thing, after everything I did for you, I raised you, I fed you, I let you live in my house for 22 years. The room was dead silent. The guests stared, frozen, at this primal domestic horror. I did not raise my voice. I did not move from my spot at the head of the table. I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I felt nothing, no pain, no anger, just a final, structural assessment. You did not let me live in your house, Elise, I said, my voice clear and cold and perfectly, terrifyingly calm. You lived in the house I repaired. You lived under the roof I paid for. You cooked in the kitchen I rebuilt. You lived on the money I provided. You were not my mother. You were my most expensive and most ungrateful tenant. The words hung in the air, brutal and true. My father made a small, choked, broken sound. I turned to him. His head was in his hands, his shoulders shaking. He looked up, his eyes wrecked and streaming. "Lexi," he whispered, his voice shattering. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry, baby. I didn't see. I never saw." "I know, Dad," I said, and I did. Bianca, her face a streaked, mascara-ruined mess, fumbled in her lap for her phone. She looked at her mother, who was hyperventilating. Her hand clawed at her throat. She looked at her husband, who was just a statue of gray stone. She pulled up her contacts, her thumb hovering over her mother's name, as if to, what call her text her. The alliance was shattered, I noted, with a cold, distant clarity, that the second audio recorder I had planted on the spice rack was still active, still capturing every word of this collapse. Sarah, the investigator, walked over to me, all business. "Ms. Rivera," she said, just loud enough for the table to hear. "I'd like a copy of that presentation deck, if you don't mind, for my official report." "Of course," I said. That was the final blow. An official report, an investigation. Ethan, the lawyer, knew what that meant. He knew his career was over. He picked up his phone from the table. He looked at Bianca, his wife, with a gaze of pure reptilian hatred. He did not say a word to her. He did not look at Elise. He just turned, walked out of the dining room, through the hall, and out the front door, slamming it behind him. The guests, horrified, began to rise, a babble of murmured excuses. We should go. It's late. Our babysitter." I let him go. I let them all go. This was the demolition. This was the collapse of the facade. The house of cards was down. But my final move, the one my grandmother had prepared for me, had not been played. The structure was down, but the site was not yet secure. The final, load-bearing truth had not yet been revealed. The guests scattered. They fled, not with the polite, drawn-out goodbyes of a normal party, but with the high-pitched, averted gaze panic of people evacuating a contaminated site. They grabbed coats without zipping them, murmuring about babysitters and early meetings, their eyes refusing to meet mine, or Elise's, or Victor's. In less than 5 minutes, the room was empty, almost empty. Sarah and Mr. Davies remained, standing by the doorway, professional witnesses to the end. Bianca was still in her chair, a collapsed mannequin, her sobs now quiet, hiccuping gasps. My father was holding his head in his hands, weeping silently into his palms, and Elise was standing. She was rigid. The mask of the hostess was gone. The mask of the shrieking victim was gone. What was left was something cold and pure and reptilian. She had been beaten, but she had one last card to play. She thought it was her ace. "Get out," she hissed at Sarah and Mr. Davies. "This is a private family matter. This is now a county matter. Mrs. Rivera." Mr. Davies said calmly, "You think you are clever, don't you?" Elise said, ignoring him. Her eyes locked on me. "You? With your little recordings and your surprise trust fund, you think you've won?" She took a step toward me. "Ethan and I knew all about your grandmother's little investment. We were planning to buy it out, but we were also planning for your eventual, predictable, emotional outburst." She let the silence hang. Then she delivered her final, killing blow. "Ethan found what matters," she said, her voice dropping, thick with venom. "He did a full, exhaustive legal search. You were born Lexi Rivera, and you are still Lexi Rivera. You are not Lexi Rivera. Victor never adopted you. You are, in the eyes of the law, a stranger. You are a legal nothing. You are just the stepkid." She smiled. A thin, bloodless line. "You have no family rights. You have no right to contest his will. You have no right to his estate. You have no legal standing to challenge me. His wife," she turned to Victor, "and you, Victor, your daughter, has just humiliated you, blown up your life, and for what? A 20% stake in a failing bookstore. I am your wife. The law protects me. My rights supersede hers." She was right. Legally, she was his wife. I was, legally, a stranger. "You are right, Elise," I said. The room went dead silent. "I am not your adopted daughter," I continued, my voice calm and analytical. "I am not Victor's legal child. Ethan's research was, for once, perfectly accurate. You were so busy looking for a way to cut out the stepkid that you assumed that was the only, or the most important, part of my identity. You were, as usual, looking at the wrong part of the blueprint." I walked to the head of the table. "I do not need to be his adopted daughter. Elise, my grandmother knew that. She knew you. The Finch Legacy Trust is its own legal person. It is the pillar. It does not care about my adoption status. It only cares about the asset, and you threatened the asset. That was your first, critical mistake." I paused. "But it was not your last. And my grandmother's trust. That was not the only thing she left for me in that safe deposit box." I turned to my father. He looked up at me, his face a ruin of confusion and grief. "Dad," I said gently, "do you remember a long, long time ago, right after Mom died before you met Elise, when you were just starting the quill compass, you were alone, you were scared, you were worried about what would happen to me, and to the store, if something happened to you?" He shook his head, a lost, foggy gesture. I don't remember." "You went to a lawyer," I said, my voice sharp and clear, cutting through his haze. "You went to my mother's family lawyer, and you signed a document. My grandmother, Eleanor, insisted on it. She helped you draft it." I reached inside my jacket. Not a phone. Not a projector. I pulled out a thick, folded document, the original, heavy vellum, crisp and yellowed. "You signed a durable power of attorney for both healthcare and finances. Dad, you made your daughter, me, Lexi Rivera, your sole and exclusive agent." Elise let out a short, barking laugh. That is invalid. A marriage automatically supersedes a prior POA. You stupid little girl. I am his wife. I am his next of kin. That paper is worthless. Normally, you would be right, Elise, I said, never taking my eyes off her. A subsequent marriage complicates things, but my grandmother, as I said, knew you. This is not a standard POA. This one is special. This one is what we call a springing power of attorney. I looked at my phone, which was still on the table. I tapped the screen, activating the speaker. Mr. Walsh, are you still on the line? A voice, cold, authoritative, and utterly unknown to Elise, boomed from the phone's speaker. I am Miss Rivera. Good evening. Elise and Bianca both recoiled, as if from a ghost. Mr. Walsh, I said, please explain to Mrs. Rivera the nature of the springing clause, item 4B, of my father's POA. Certainly. Gideon's voice echoed in the ruined dining room. A standard power of attorney can be superseded by a spouse. However, the document Ms. Rivera holds, signed by Victor Rivera 22 years ago, was drafted to remain dormant until a specific condition was met. That condition, as drafted by Eleanor Finch, is as follows. This power of attorney activates immediately and irrevocably upon the presentation of credible evidence that the principal, Victor Rivera, is the target of financial fraud, duress, or bad faith negotiations specifically related to the assets of the Quill Compass property. Gideon paused, letting the words sink into the silence. Ms. Rivera presented my office with that credible evidence 2 days ago. He continued. The audio recordings of the conspiracy, the forensic audit of the fraudulent LLC, North Pier, as of that moment, the condition was met. The power of attorney is now active. It is ironclad. As of this moment, Ms. Rivera is Victor Rivera's sole, legal, financial agent. You, Mrs. Rivera, have no legal authority over his assets. None. Elise's face was white. She understood. She finally, truly, understood. She had been outmaneuvered by a dead woman and a stepkid. And that, I said, is twist number 1. And twist number 2, I continued, is the one you handed me tonight, by exposing your own conspiracy, your own plot to use a fraudulent notary on Monday. You have given Mr. Davies all the probable cause he needs to freeze your actions indefinitely. You have given my father, Victor, the legal and moral right to void any and all documents you prepared. You have invalidated your entire scheme in front of witnesses. I picked up another document from the table. One Gideon had couriered to me this morning. I walked over to Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies, I said, this is the official, notarized notification of the activated power of attorney. I am now the sole legal agent for these properties. I am formally requesting that your office and the district attorney's office communicates only with me or my counsel, Mr. Walsh, regarding this investigation. Mr. Davies took the document. He nodded gravely. Understood. Ms. Rivera, we will be in touch on Monday morning. He then turned to Elise and to Bianca, who was now frozen, her eyes wide with a new legal terror. Mrs. Rivera, Ms. Marlowe, you will, in all likelihood, be invited to speak with our office and the DA regarding this matter. I would strongly advise you to retain counsel. He paused, his expression cold. Counsel other than Mr. Marlowe, of course. I suspect he will be rather busy managing his own disbarment proceedings. He and Sarah, who gave me a sharp, impressed nod, saw themselves out. The front door clicked shut. We were alone, the 4 of us. The wreckage of the party, the spilled wine, the half-eaten, 30-candle cake. My father took a deep, shuddering breath. He looked up at me, and the fog of grief was clearing, replaced by a profound, agonizing, and unmistakable relief. You protected me, he whispered. Eleanor, you. I chose you, Lexi. I did. Before I ever knew what optimize meant, I chose you. I signed that paper. I chose my daughter. Bianca let out a low, wounded animal sound. It is not fair. It is not fair. That was supposed to be our future. That was my inheritance. I looked at her. The last shred of pity I ever had for her was gone. Fairness, I said. Fairness is not everyone getting an equal piece of the money. Bianca, fairness is not lying to your father. Fairness is not trying to steal from the person who paid for your education. You had a choice. You chose the lie. And this is the result. Elise was shaking, her hands clenched at her sides. She had nothing left. No legal standing, no money, no allies, no future. She had only her title. It was the only thing left. I am his wife, she finally screamed, her voice breaking on a wave of pure, desperate rage. I am his legal, lawful wife. You cannot just throw me out. The law protects me. I stood at the head of the table. I looked at the woman who had called me a thing my entire life. You are right, Elise, I said, my voice quiet, almost gentle. You are his wife. That is a legal fact. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table, my voice dropping to a precise, structural whisper. And I said, tapping the power of attorney document, am the load-bearing beam that holds up this entire house. You are just the wallpaper, and you are, as of tonight, peeling. She stared, her mouth open, speechless for the first time in her life. The birthday party, her grand celebration of victory, had just become the official, witnessed, legal record of her destruction. The demolition was complete, but the final act, the cleanup, and the rebuilding had not yet begun. The next morning, the house felt like a building after a controlled demolition. The air was thick with the dust of what had been, the silence heavy and absolute, the wreckage of the party, the plates of half-eaten, congealed food, the dozens of glasses. The dark wine stain on the white carpet was a physical testament to the collapse. Elise and Bianca were gone. They had retreated to their respective rooms. The doors locked. My father was in his study, the door ajar, sitting in his armchair and staring at the wall, not at his books, but at the empty space where the mounted pike had been. I had taken it down. The key was in my pocket. There was no time for grief. Demolition is only the first phase. Then comes the cleanup and the stabilization. At 9 a.m. sharp, I was on the phone with Gideon Walsh. We're filing, I said. Today? I am already at the courthouse. Ms. Rivera. His voice came back, crisp and ready. The temporary preservation order for all real estate and liquid assets tied to Victor Rivera is being filed as we speak, citing the power of attorney and the fiduciary rights of the Finch Legacy Trust. By noon, not $1 can be moved, not one title transferred, without your signature. I hung up and made my second call. Marjorie? I am ahead of you, she said, her voice holding, for the first time, a note of grim satisfaction. My full audit, including the audio transcripts and Mr. Marlowe's professional misconduct, has been compiled. It is being sent by bonded courier to the State Bar Association's Ethics Committee. They are particularly fond of cases involving conflicts of interest and elder fraud. His career is not just over, it will be dismantled. My final call was to a mobile notary, a legitimate one, a woman named Mrs. Peterson, who I had used for Iron Light's contracts for 5 years. I need you at my father's house in 1 hour, I said, and I need you to be thorough. When she arrived, I went to the study. My father looked up at me, his eyes hollow. Lexi. What? What happens now? Now, I said, my voice gentle but firm. We rebuild. We undo what they did. I led him to the dining room table. I had cleared a single space amidst the debris. I had a stack of documents, prepared by Gideon. Dad, I said, these are formal, legal revocations. This one cancels any and all wills you have signed in the past 10 years. This one cancels any estate plans or trusts prepared by Elise or Ethan Marlowe. This one voids any and all pending financial applications, including the HELOC. You are taking back control." Mrs. Peterson, all business, walked him through each one. "Mr. Rivera, do you understand this document?" He read it. He looked at me, then at the forged will from last night, which I had placed on the table as a reference. His hand, which had been trembling, became steady. "Yes," he said, his voice quiet. "I understand perfectly." He signed, one by one. He signed away the optimization. He signed away the restructuring. He signed away 22 years of Elise's control. With each stroke of the pen, I saw the fog lift from him, the weight of his own passivity being shed. Upstairs, we heard a door open. Elise, she came down the stairs, dressed in an expensive silk robe, her face pale and puffy, her hair a mess. She was holding her phone. "My cards are being declined," she said, her voice a flat, dead monotone. "The bank. They said all our accounts are frozen. They said there is a clawback notice from a law firm." "That is correct," I said, not looking up as Mrs. Peterson stamped the final document. "Gideon Walsh filed the preservation order. You cannot access the HELOC. You cannot access the house equity. You cannot access the bookstore accounts. The lines are cut." She stared at me, the full scope of her financial ruin dawning on her. You cannot do this. I am his wife. I have rights. I will hire a lawyer." "You do that," I said, handing Mrs. Peterson her fee. "But you will have to pay him with your own money, of which you have none. Every dollar you had was tied to my father's assets, and as his legal agent, I have frozen them to protect him from your fraud." She looked at my father. "Victor, tell this thing, that she cannot do this to me." My father stood up. He looked at the woman he had loved, or at least, the woman he had allowed to run his life. He looked at her, and I saw not anger, but a profound, exhausted sadness. "You tried to sell my store. Elise," he whispered. "You tried to steal my house. You tried to erase my daughter. I have nothing left to say to you." He turned, walked back into his study, and for the first time in my memory, he closed the door. Elise's face crumpled. It was the end. Later that afternoon, Bianca came to me. She did not knock. She just appeared in the dining room, where I was bagging up the debris from her party. She was not the triumphant, sneering woman from Napa. She was a pale, terrified girl, her eyes red and swollen. "He left," she whispered. "Ethan, he took his car and his suits. He's gone." "I am not surprised," I said, tying a trash bag. He said the bar association, that he's going to be disbarred. He said I was as guilty as he was, an accomplice." Her voice cracked. "Lexi, please, my son, he is only 2. Please, you cannot send me to jail. I did not know, I swear. I just listened to them." I stopped what I was doing. I looked at her. I saw the weakness, the panic, the lifetime of taking the easy road. "You knew," I said, my voice flat. "You knew it was wrong. You knew I was paying for your life, and you took it, and you sneered at me while you did. You knew." "Please," she begged, the tears streaming down her face. "I will do anything, for my son. Please." I studied her for a long moment. My grandmother's letter had said, "You are a cornerstone." A cornerstone does not just hold up the structure, it sets the lines for the entire build. I went to my briefcase and pulled out a single, final document. This is an agreement. It is not forgiveness. It is a contract. I laid it on the table. 1, you will sign a full, legal, notarized confession of your part in this conspiracy. It will be held by my lawyer. 2, you will cooperate fully with the district attorney's investigation into Ethan and Elise. 3, you will formally and forever waive any and all claims to Victor Rivera's estate, present or future, and 4, you will pay me back. Pay you back. The family scholarship, I said. The $61,800 I paid for your private school, the money that taught you how to be better than me. You will repay it all, with interest. I have drafted a 20-year payment schedule. You will get a job, and you will pay it. She stared at the paper, her breath catching. If you sign this, I said, and adhere to every single part of it, I will not pursue a separate civil suit against you for damages, and I will, in my official statement to the DA, note your full and immediate cooperation. It might not keep you out of court, but it is the only mercy you will get, from anyone. She picked up the pen. She read the terms. Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely hold it, but she signed, and as she pushed the paper back to me, the look of contempt she had held for me for 22 years was gone. It was replaced by something else, a cold, bitter, and absolute understanding. The Stepkid now held all the power. Victor and I worked with Gideon. The 20% trust my grandmother left was formally converted. It became a priority voting right. I now had the final, legal say on any sale, leveraging, or alteration of the bookstore and the house. I was the firewall. I gave Elise 30 days. You have 30 days to find a new place to live. Elise, I said, as she stood in the hallway. Pack your bags. I am not throwing you onto the street. You have 1 month to make arrangements, for the sake of your grandson, who is innocent in all this. I am giving you a quiet, clean exit, but it is an exit. She did not fight. She did not argue. She was a shell. On the 30th day, she packed 2 large suitcases. She called a cab. She stood on the porch, under the lights I had hung, and for the first time in her life, there was no one to carry her bags to the car. She dragged them down the walkway, herself. The house was quiet. The fake facade was gone. It was time to rebuild. I started with the bookstore. I brought my crew from Ironlight Renovations. We gutted it. We tore out the low, water-stained drop ceilings. We tore up the cheap, peeling linoleum. We found, underneath it all, what I knew was there: a magnificent, 100-year-old hardwood floor and a soaring ceiling held up by massive, exposed wooden beams. I did not just repair it. I re-engineered it. I put in warm, hanging lights. I designed a new coffee bar, in the back, where Elise had always stored unsellable inventory. I built a free community reading nook, with comfortable chairs and a small fireplace. 3 months later, we had the grand reopening. My father, who looked 10 years younger, stood by the door. The old faded "The Quill Compass" sign was gone. In its place was a new one, carved from warm, rich mahogany, designed in a clean, modern font. It read, "Load-bearing books." Victor stood next to me, watching the crowd pour in. He was holding a cappuccino. He looked at the new sign, then at me, his eyes full of a pride that I had never seen before. "Load-bearing," he said, testing the words. He smiled. "I like that. Our family does not need a fake facade anymore. Lexi, it just needs a strong foundation." That night, I was back in my own office at Ironlight, reviewing the blueprints for an expansion. We were doubling our square footage. My work, my little workshop, was thriving. On my desk, I kept a large, clear glass jar. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single, heavy, 2-inch galvanized steel screw. I held it for a moment. It was a symbol, a reminder. I dropped it into the jar. It landed with a heavy, satisfying clink against the others, each one representing a moment I had held the structure of my life together when someone else was trying to tear it down. A breeze came through my open window, and I heard the sound of my old metal wind chimes, the ones my mother had given me, the ones I had hung outside my office. They were not clashing violently anymore. They were ringing, a soft, clear, harmonious sound in the cold night air. The knot had been untied. The new structure was stable. I looked out over the dark, quiet waters of Lake Michigan, and I said the words, just to myself, just to feel the truth of them. I am not just the stepkid. I am the designer of my own life. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. I would love to connect with you. Please comment down below and let me know where you are listening from and what you thought of Elise's takedown. And of course, please subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories and like this video if you really want to support us. Hit that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.